glad to be here today to share with you the story of the Philippines. Let me just pull up my slide. My presentation today will be about recovering from the pandemic and other shocks. And let me start before anything else. Two economic principles that I typically ask my audience to memorize, dream about, and apply. Because knowing these two would be very important to understanding everything that is happening to the Philippines and to the world. The first one is nothing is free from heaven, and the second one is everything is a trade-off. Now, in this pandemic, everyone would like to get some support from the government because many jobs have been lost and incomes have gone down. Some people might think that the government can expect all this money to come free from heaven. The reality here is that nothing is free. The government will have to finance it either through present tax collection that everyone pays or future tax collection in the form of borrowing. And so when we talk about, for instance, Bayanihan 3 or any other fiscal measure, we always have to think about where we can responsibly get the financing. The second principle is there's no perfect solution. Everything is a trade-off. This person would like to sleep, would like to work and eat food, and also play video games. But as you know, everything is finite. We have finite time, we have finite clean air, finite clean water. So everything we do, we will have to be making a very important cost-benefit analysis. So when I have to decide whether to give one group something, a subsidy or an allowance or any transfer, I have to be getting it from someone else. So this is a very important balancing act that government plays, especially now in the COVID-19 pandemic. So let me now go to the Philippine development story. So let me begin with this vision for the Philippines, which the Duterte administration put forward at the very start. And it is a very simple two objectives. The first is by 2022, we reduce the poverty rate from 21.6% of the population to 14%, meaning we lift 6 million Filipinos out of poverty. And the second one is by 2022, we reach a GNI per capita of 996 rather, and that will achieve upper middle income country status like countries like Thailand or China today. And working hard towards 2040, which is our long-term vision, we would like to eradicate extreme poverty and become a high-income country, like, for instance, Japan and South Korea today. So this is basically what the whole administration's reform effort is all about. Now, in 2018, when the Philippine Statistics Authority computed the poverty rate, we realized that we have gained already the 6 million lifted out of poverty. So a recalculation of the poverty incidence shows that in 2015, there was 23.5% of the population below the poverty line, which is around 60 pesos per person per day. In 2018, the poverty rate improved to 16.7%. This is the biggest improvement in our history. In other words, we achieved the 6 million 4 years ahead of our target. And despite COVID-19, there is a high chance that we also achieve the 14% target by 2022 or next year. And the reason for a very good performance is we have been very focused on our reform agenda. In 2016, the government proposed a 10-point socioeconomic agenda where we focus on ensuring macroeconomic policies are sustained, and the latest credit rating from Standard & Poor's, where our credit rating was kept at BBB plus with a stable outlook, is a testament to the good macro fiscal foundation. We pursued tax reform. We were able to do that despite COVID-19 by passing the CREATE law. We passed the Ease of Doing Business law. We spent more than 1 trillion pesos or 5% of our GDP on infrastructure. On rural development, we have begun with reforms in the rice sector, and we are going to do more in the other sectors. We have also worked around the issues on land management. On human capital, we have passed the Universal Healthcare Act, which is funding a lot of the COVID-19 response in the health sector. On science and arts, we have passed innovation law, the innovative startup law. We have a space center today, and the Balik Scientist Award or program, wherein our top scientists are incentivized to come back to the Philippines. On social protection, we have the national ID, and I will explain about that later. And we continue to work towards the implementation of the reproductive healthcare law. So this is our 10-point socioeconomic agenda. The green ones are the ones we have substantially achieved, and we are working towards the achievement of the yellow ones. And this is basically what is driving the strong performance of the economy prior to COVID-19. Now let us now talk about recent developments. The reality is that COVID-19 is not going to go away easily. We are on our second major spike in the country. However, the progress has been quite good. So we were able to reduce the number of total average cases by more than half since the peak in late March. Notice also that when the government decided to further reopen the economy last October 12th and during the Christmas season, we did not see a spike. In other words, we are able to manage and ensure that the risks are adequately managed. Unfortunately, because of the long history or experience of quarantine, our economy suffered significantly. So this is a evolution of the quarantine status from the most stringent ECQ, that is the red that you see, to the MECQ, to the GCQ, MGCQ, and no quarantine. So we have been experiencing various levels of quarantine for more than 14 months since middle of March last year. And as you can see, we are again, because of the spike, back in the ECQ and MECQ period in the middle of the first half of this year. And that is affecting a big part of the economy because the NCR and the adjacent regions 3 and 4A have the majority of economic output. And the result is not surprising. The gross domestic product, which was very strong, consistently very strong before the COVID-19 pandemic at more than 6% growth, collapse. And as we reopen the economy, slowly we are able to see improvements from the lowest of -17 to more moderate contraction of -4.2. So in other words, we are seeing quarter-on-quarter positive development, and we hope that after this spike, we will resume the pace of economic recovery. One thing that most people don't understand if I show the GDP is the impact to the people. So this slide basically shows you that last year's quarantine and pandemic cost the economy more than ₱1 trillion worth of wages and income at the household level, or on average 2.8 billion pesos of foregone income at the household level per day. And on average, workers lose 23,000 pesos, or around I believe around $500 equivalent, but some sectors have been hit much harder because they have totally lost their job. Now, the main difference between last year's quarantine and this year is that we did not shut down 75% of the economy. In fact, we allowed the public transport to operate even during this year's ECQ. So this is mobility data from Google. Notice that from a collapse last year, by 80%. This year, we are able to keep more or less public transport around 50% of capacity, and that is because of the one seat apart rule. And the NEDA has proposed that we further support workers' mobility by expanding the route, the frequency, and supporting active transport, such as the bike lane network. So unlike last year, I don't think in the second quarter, the economy will see any contraction given the change in our risk management strategy. In terms of people actually going to work this year, you will also see that despite the ECQ or MECQ in the last 3 months, more people are going to work. We are just 25% down from the normal period compared to last year when we were 50 or 70 or 80% down. So this shows the kind of recovery that we are expecting in the second quarter. And a big part of this is our policy to restrict children and hence their family from going out. And this is a very big part of economic growth. The consumption of family, which is almost half of all non-essential, meaning outside food consumption. Now, in terms of the impact of the quarantine on jobs, what we can clearly see is that the quarantine status has a very direct impact on employment. In areas outside NCR, that is the blue line, notice that the unemployment rate significantly declined from a peak of 18.5% to as low as 8.2% once those provinces' quarantine status were relaxed to MGCQ. However, in the National Capital Region, notice that for the most part of last year, we have much higher unemployment rate because of the more stringent quarantine status. In other words, the economy actually is strong enough to recover, but we have artificial reasons or policies that prevent the economy from fully functioning. But at least in January, the monthly survey, in the quarterly survey of the labor force, which disaggregates across region, we see improvements in the NCR region. And this is, of course, the reflection of the further opening up of the economy. Now, this chart shows you how much more jobs we have created or full-time equivalent employment we have created over the survey periods. Between January and April of last year, we lost 8.7 million jobs because of the ECQ. Between April and July, we recovered 7.5 million jobs when we relaxed to GCQ level. From July to October last year, we lost 1.5 million jobs, but this is largely because of agriculture, the flooding, and the series of 5 typhoons that we experienced last year. But since October, and we did do the survey monthly starting this year at the national level, we can see a significant and gradual progress in job creation. In other words, as of March, we have a net employment creation of 2.8 million from where we started prior to the pandemic. And of course, the quality of job is also important, and that is what we are continuously aspiring for. Another indicator that we monitor quite closely is poverty. This is self-rated hunger data by the social weather stations. The government does not collect high-frequency hunger data, but when one uses the SWS data, you can see that the hunger rate is also highly correlated with the quarantine restriction. In areas outside NCR, the hunger rate did go up to 34%, but when we relaxed the quarantine, it improved to 14.9%. In fact, the hunger rate is much higher in NCR, where 3.2 million people, or almost one-fourth, are hungry due to the GCQ. Of course, in the latter, in the previous few months, we can see probably a deterioration. That is why we are keen to reopen the economy as soon as the present spike is under control. Now, earlier I did inform everyone that the way we do public policy here, especially around COVID-19, is that we have to do a cost-benefit analysis because there's no perfect solution. Everything is a trade-off. So let me just give you an idea. This is a chart that you don't need to read line by line. But let me give you an idea of what kind of thinking we go through every time the IATF meets to decide whether we relax the quarantine status or we make it more stringent. So we measure the benefits in terms of how many cases we would prevent, how many COVID deaths we would prevent, and how many severe and critical that will affect our hospital capacity against the cost of a further quarantine in terms of how many more poor people, unemployed people, income loss, and how many more people will die because they do not get the kind of treatment. So again, no need to read this slide, but this is to give you a flavor of what decision-making process we always go through every 2 weeks when we discuss the level of quarantine. So let me now go to the recovery program. The starting point of our recovery is our very strong macroeconomic foundation. Before the crisis, we had strong growth. We were actually about to become upper middle income in 2020 or 2 years ahead of schedule. We manage our inflation very well. We have the strongest ever fiscal position, largely due to the effect of the tax reform. We also had the lowest debt as a share of our GDP. We spent the most on infrastructure. We have the highest credit rating compared to a sea of downgrades around the world. I think maintaining the credit rating at the level of BBB plus is actually a very important achievement. And we achieved the lowest ever unemployment, underemployment, and poverty rate. So this is the foundation. In other words, unlike a war where the productive assets of the economy are destroyed, none of our infrastructure, none of our human resources, and our reforms were affected. The economic performance you see today is due to an artificial policy of restricting economic performance because of excessive risk aversion last year. And that is why we are changing our objective to risk management. So given that, we are proposing the following economic targets: 6 to 7% recovery this year, and a further 7 to 9% recovery in 2022. These are positive growth, allowing us to return to pre-pandemic levels sometime in the latter half of 2022. There are 3 pillars that will govern the recovery. The first is we reopen the economy at the appropriate time, and we allowed an expanded age group to go out with safeguards, including the resumption of face-to-face learning. The second is we have more than 15% of GDP in terms of fiscal, monetary, and financial resources, and we propose to accelerate their implementation. And we have a timely implementation of the vaccination program, which I will discuss in detail later. Now, the reality is that this virus is not going to go away. We have to live with it. Last year, many thought that the experience of SARS-1 will be our expected trajectory, basically 6 months to recover. But this virus is not going to go away easily. So that is why we have to work together to adhere to the public health standards so that we can reopen the economy as soon as we can. So the first recommendation, and this is very important, this is the PDITR strategy. The quarantine restrictions do not solve anything, as you know. They only buy time. What will solve is adherence to the prevent, detect, isolate, treat, recover, and now the vaccination strategy. And 95% of the time, as many of you already know, you can prevent the spread of the virus by simply wearing a mask, washing hands, staying at home except for essential activities, and if we go out to social distance. 99% of the people in the Philippines are not affected by COVID, and 98% are not affected at the household level. In other words, they are able to follow this minimum health standard, and the economy should be allowed to operate to serve their needs. In terms of contact tracing, we are now launching an automatic way of doing contact tracing that will reduce the detect to isolate period from 7 to 5 days and reduce cases by more than half, according to our epidemiological models. We have put in place significant additions to our quarantine, isolation, and bed capacity. In fact, the critical care utilization has gone down from 80% to around 60% and falling in the National Capital Region. So let me now go to the next strategy. We have at least 6 instruments, whether it is on the fiscal, whether it is a spending or a tax break, whether it is on the financial or monetary. The total contribution since last year is 2 trillion pesos or 15% of our gross domestic product. So our strategy here is we have the instruments, but we have to implement them as soon as we can. Bayanihan 1 and 2 are basically health and social protection measures to help affected sectors, create lowers taxes, and gives more targeted and transparent and performance-based incentives. This is about helping banks offload their non-performing loans and assets so that more funds can be lent. Guide is still in Congress, and that addresses solvency issues of strategically important firms. We have a 1.1 trillion peso infrastructure program that is beyond 5% of GDP, which we intend to fully implement. And we have the 2021 national budget, which is geared towards recovery and protection from the pandemic. In terms of our vaccination program, we have reached more than 5 million doses given to the priority A1 to A4 groups. A1, as you know, are the health care workers, A2, senior citizens, A3, people with comorbidities, and now we have decided to open A4 to all workers in the National Capital Region and 8 high-risk provinces. So instead of just focusing on frontline workers, it will be all workers. And by doing that, we can increase the chances of achieving herd immunity sooner rather than later. So A1, 2, 3 continues to be prioritized. However, we are not going to wait for all of them to be inoculated. We are opening now A4 for all workers in the NCR plus 8 high-risk areas. Let me end the main part with a discussion of the national ID. Many of you probably come from countries with national ID. This is one of our priority reforms. It has been more than 25 years in the making, but 3 years ago, we enacted a law that provides for a national ID. And because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we have taken precautions to ensure that we minimize the risk of the virus spreading. So step 1 is a house-to-house or online collection of demographics of all citizens and resident aliens. So all of you can actually apply. Step 2 is the capture of biometrics at the registration center and the opening of bank accounts for anyone with no bank accounts, because that is one of the key objectives of the national ID. And step 3 is the delivery of the actual national ID. And we have actually started this in the last 8 months, and we continue to move forward and achieve our 50 to 70 million target by the end of 2021. So our achievements are, I think, quite good, and we are halfway to our 70 million target. In terms of step 1, which is the collection of demographics, we started this last year with more than 10 million registered with demographic data in our system. This year, we had 23 million. All of this, 34 million, we visited them house to house. There are officials bringing tablets to collect the demographic information. And then starting April 30, we have opened the online system. And this is open to everyone presently physically in the Philippines. So I invite you to try it out to input your demographics. And the total so far is 35 million completed with step 1. And we are in almost all the provinces in the country. Now, step 2 is the visit to the registration center and the capture of biometrics. As of the 24th of May, we are 64.7% of our June target. We are present in 23 of 37 provinces. And we have achieved 105% of our May 24 target, or more than 10 million. And we have opened bank accounts for 3.4 million. We have opened bank accounts for 1 million, and the total that will be opened once the processing period is completed is around 3.4 million. And again, our target by the end of the year is the 70 million. And COVID-19 and the restrictions are our two hindrances, but we will work hard to complete this by the end of the year. And there are three important use cases for the national ID. The first one is financial inclusion. And we want to achieve 100% financial inclusion at the household level by the end of the year. So all 26 million families, of which currently 70% of them don't have bank accounts, will be able to open a bank account. And we do that by co-locating land bank beside our registration centers. We will also use that for general population vaccine distribution, and we will use that to identify the beneficiaries of our future social protection program to deposit direct to their bank accounts. So let me now end. Many of you, probably in your offices, would like to understand how you can help. So let me propose three more suggestions. Third, after understanding the two economic principles, is to know the facts. Number four is to contribute solutions. Don't stop with the what to do, but also focus on the how to do. And the fifth one is share also the good. You probably have access to social media and your Viber or WhatsApp. I'm sure you receive 1,000 messages. However, if you do not take the extra effort to know the facts, you might be spreading the virus of false information, which is spreading much faster than COVID-19. And nowadays, we need to share only the facts. And you already know many things circulating about the virus, the vaccine, and so on. Knowing the facts actually can improve the way we process information and achieve a more harmonious way of dealing with our present problem. The next one is there are many people who have brilliant ideas, but they read from the same textbooks that we all read. The more important thing for government, especially if you are assisting the government, is not on the what to do, but how to do it. An example is someone told me that we should be giving wage subsidy to the affected workers. But no one of the brilliant people told me how to do it when institutions are portless, when we don't have bank accounts for all workers or a national ID. So it is important, I think, for everyone to not only contribute to the problem or identifying the problem, but contributing solutions by answering the how to do or how to reform question. And finally is to share the good news. I'm sure you have heard too many bad news, but the typical behavior of people is you complain when you experience something bad. Hardly will you praise, for instance, the chef if you are served good food in the restaurant. But 9 out of 10, I'm sure you will complain if you are served bad food. And I think this is also very important for a more collective way of understanding how we can work together. So with that, thank you very much. I hope this presentation has provided some value to your lives. A good day.